If you saw Al Gore's movie, An Inconvenient Truth, then, well, honestly, you probably had a really good 100-minute nap. But if you managed to stay awake, like I did, then you probably remember seeing some of the amazing shots he had of the beautiful ice shelf that were killing. Remember that? But imagine for a second if some of those shots in his movie weren't real. They were computer generated. Now, imagine that he ripped those fake shots off from another movie. Do you think that would hurt his credibility at all? Yeah, me neither. Nobody would pay attention. ABC News actually discovered this, and watch this.
And if you were flying over it in a helicopter, you'd see it 700 feet tall. They are so majestic.
Wait a minute. That shot looks just like the one in the opening credits of The Day After Tomorrow.
Yeah, that's our shot. That's a fully computer-generated shot. There's nothing real in there.
Yeah, that's what I said about the movie. Nothing real in there. So now when Al Gore says that a cyclone that devastated a place we used to call Burma and killed over 100,000 people is, quote, a consequence of global warming, should we believe him? What about when he says that the sea ice is melting faster than ever? Run for your lives! Even though data now shows from the government that sea ice in the southern hemisphere is now at a 30-year high. How is that working? Al Gore doesn't have a science degree. He doesn't have any credibility, quite frankly, either. But what he does have, political connections and a lot of money. You put those two things together, and the result is climate change bills that might just change the way all of us live. George Landreth is the president of the conservative group Frontiers of Freedom. George, come on, how much money do you take from Shell? How much?
None.
How much from Exxon?
We're not funded by them.
Really?
Well, years ago, we did get some funding from them, but we don't get funding now. So
years ago,
not
they planted the seeds. Okay, the Lieberman-Warner bill. This thing drives me crazy because, I've heard big oil. I think the president of Shell said, cap and trade, that's actually really good. I cannot for the life of me figure out how cap and trade would be good for the average American.
Well, I think it's good for the average American if the average American wants to pay an extra $6,000. A study was recently done, and it determined that by the year 2030, the average American family would be paying $6,752, basically a stealth tax, as a result of the Lieberman-Warner bill. Now, if that's good news, then fine. I guess that's good for families. But I know in my family that wouldn't be good news.
Okay, so wait a minute. So how this works is if you're burning energy to make something, or you're an airline, you have a cap, and if you spend more than that, if you burn more energy or put more CO2 in, you've got to trade with somebody else. So in other words, you buy your pollution.
Right, exactly. And to be very clear, we're not really talking about pollution. We're talking about CO2,
right.
a gas that you and I breathe out and breathe in, that plants need. Life could not exist if we didn't have CO2.
So in other words, if we pay for our sins, it's okay.
Exactly, and that's what's going to drive all this. That's what's going to make it more expensive. So you and I will have the privilege of paying all this extra money so that someone in Washington can feel good about themselves and feel like they did something good for the country.
Yeah. Well, go ahead.
Well, but it's not going to do anything to change the climate. Even for example, the UN agrees that if we do all this stuff they've suggested, that it would make literally tenths of a degree difference. And so the question is, that you can't even tell that. So do you want to pay that much money for the privilege of, handing over $6,752 annually to help someone in Washington feel good about themselves?
This is really amazing because this is from the same clowns. They just spent over $400 million redoing the Capitol, so the Capitol is now green. $80,000 we're paying some guy, I think it's in like North Dakota, to plant trees that he was going to plant anyway.
Right.
But now they've taken $80,000 of our tax money and sent it to some guy to plant some trees, and spent $400 million replacing the light bulbs and everything else. These ideas are the same, coming from the same people that we begged, don't mandate ethanol, and now we're paying higher food prices for.
Well, you're exactly right. I mean, the truth is, 2 years ago, a year ago, 6 months ago, ethanol was the solution, and we were all supposed to be, it was going to be cleaner, better, cheaper, blah, 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 all that. And yet what we see it's doing is it's starving people in the third world. Our food prices are higher, and the truth is ethanol is not an economical replacement for typical gasoline.
All right, George, thanks very much. I'll tell you what this is all about. The oil companies are for it because it's going to choke the bat snot out of coal, and we're going to need the coal.